All right, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started here.
Welcome to Consent and Agency in Narrative Development. A quick disclaimer, we're going to move pretty fast, but we're going to drop all the slides in the Discord afterwards.
I'm Will Lowry, he, him, and I am a multidisciplinary designer for theater. I live and work in the Lehigh Valley of Pennsylvania, the traditional lands of the Lenni Lenape people, whose land was swindled from them in the walking purchase of 1737.
I'm Emily Hartford, she, her. I'm a theater and media director. I live on the unceded land of the Canarsie and Munsee Lenape, indigenous people colonially known as Brooklyn, New York. We honor the generations of stewardship Native people have given to the water, air, and land.
We are creative partners with Flux Theatre Ensemble, with whom we created the work that we'll be speaking about today. We're a nonprofit theater company run by 15 creative partners and non-hierarchical organization. In the spirit of collaboration, we actually asked the creative partners to contribute the doodles that adorn our slides.
Our mission statement is, Flux Theatre Ensemble pollinates plays and culture to grow creative kinship. Against the dominance of exploitative systems, Flux advances collective care, long-term artistic collaboration, and shared power. Rooted in New York City, we follow where our people lead, across distance, disciplines, and generations. Rising toward liberation, we create the worlds we need, an act of play at a time.
Our core values are collective care.
Aesthetic of liberation.
You can come on in. Yeah. Consent and agency, hence the title of this session.
Rigor and release.
And joy.
Flux has created 31 full productions and seeded the creation of over 500 works. We do this through regular new play development intensives, stage reading, an annual retreat, and other forms of support.
So one of these productions was Our Options Have Changed, co-created by the ensemble with the lead artists of Corey Allen, who unfortunately could not join us today, Emily, and me.
Our Options Have Changed is an interactive audio project accessed via telephone. It's a choose-your-own-adventure where callers are introduced to a menu of offerings by an entity called the All for One Foundation. But if you spend long enough exploring, eventually you'll discover that not everyone in this world believes the All for One has your well-being in mind.
To give you a little idea of what it's like before we go further, and hoping the tech is still working, here's a minute-ish long trailer we created for a developmental showcase prior to the release. Cross fingers, everyone.
Does your world seem like a fractured snow globe? Splintered shards of normalcy scattered all about.
You aren't alone. Looking outside, it's hard not to see the shadows of what used to be.
So many days now filled with harried new routines, plagued by complacency.
Plagued by complacency.
Makes you wish for simpler times. When things seem less in flux. Welcome to the Holistic Wellness Hope Line. At All for One, we believe each person can unlock their personal potential and overcome
Perhaps you are not yet ready for programming your
for
responsibility.
mindful meditation.
What may appear as unfit.
I was never one to turn down a
Space where you can stretch
free
your
meal.
arms out to the side.
Yours
For the beauty, press star.
Don't
Press one.
Not this
Spell one. Scribble the font is yours.
Close your eyes and listen to my voice.
No
Island
eyeball.
is you are at.
There's danger. The wizards have trapped the witches and
Press two.
Option 4.
Press down.
Please listen carefully as our options have changed.
So we began creating this project in summer 2020, just a few months into the isolation of the pandemic. As a theater company who obviously couldn't produce theater at the time, we took the opportunity to work in a form that was new to us, and the restrictions of the time also necessitated new collaborative processes and techniques. This talk will be about how one of Flux's core values inspired those innovations. But first, to give you an idea of how this project came to be, Will, Corey, and I, along with our fellow creative partner and playwright Jason Seng, took part in the Orchard Project's Liveness Lab, which was a gathering of fellow theater makers to examine the concept of liveness in the absence of in-person gatherings. Those conversations inspired us to play with the idea of a phone line that audience members could interact with and either give something or take something. We were interested in code as a potential theatrical structure, and we started having conversations about a phone service that was run by an authority entity that would get hacked by an underground rebel faction. And we imagined this would live in the context of a society that had suffered a catastrophic collapse that caused instability and isolation.
We also saw this as an invitation to overcome the barriers of participation, both space and time, for the creative partners and then ultimately for the audience. The project enabled us to engage together creatively in a time it was impossible to do so traditionally. We also realized the project allowed for the expression and experimentation of our core values, both in its making and in narrative, letting different entities take some of these values to potentially unhelpful extremes.
The result, our options have changed, is a phone number the audience participant calls through which they navigate pre-recorded menus to engage in exercises, explore these factions, and uncover secrets. Each caller shapes their own individual journey through the world.
All right, so how do these seeds become our options have changed?
We decided on tools of collaborative creation through a devising process that centered our value of consent and agency.
And what do we mean by devising? These are theater-making practices that are generally more ensemble-driven rather than written by a single playwright, and iterative in construction rather than being pre-planned. While devising traditionally occurred gathered together in one place and time, again, this process would necessitate asynchronous devising in the forced isolation of 2020.
And why does our core value of consent and agency matter for this? We describe consent and agency as a framework for non-hierarchical collaboration. This framework prioritizes consensus-based decision-making in all processes, and the value of consent is set in a healthy tension with agency, where each collaborator is fully empowered to take risks and experiment. This value is highly practical in ensemble creation processes because it allows for fluid decision-making power. There's a useful push and pull between the process to reach consensus and the freedom to generate and progress individual ideas. When we're practicing consent and agency, the power to make any individual decision is owned by the people who are most invested in the outcome of that decision. We see it as a process of stepping into and out of leadership. When working within this framework, we ask what decisions are critical to make as a group, and in what areas can we encourage individual creative decision-making?
So when our options have changed, this process emerged organically as a result of our ensemble's long history of collaboration together and in response to these unique needs of both the time and the format. And we're going to talk through several practices that supported our approach.
These practices can all ultimately be boiled down to two strategies. One, generate collective understanding among all collaborators, and two, set up invitations for our collaborators to surprise us. So let's jump into the useful practices that emerged during this process.
First, build the world. In the Cambridge Introduction to Narrative, H. Porter Abbott discusses story primarily consisting of entities and events, noting an additional ingredient of setting, which he argues is optional. However, we focused entirely on the setting first, collectively deciding on and expanding this world, this heterocosm. We're specifically striving to build consent into the general truth and vocabulary of the experience prior to creating characters or events.
The format of this work was made of Zoom calls, Basecamp messages, collective note-taking and spreadsheets, and a steady creation of world frameworks. This fostered group buy-in for the setting. This may appear similar to a writer's room process or a traditional devising process where the ensemble is deciding on a story together. But first, we're centering world before character or story, and second, instead of pitching ideas to determine a single path of events, our goal was to cultivate a garden of many paths.
Initially, we didn't even know what these two sides would be called, but the authority layer eventually became All for One, founders of the Holistic Wellness Hope Line, and the Rebel layer became a subversive opposed entity known as the Real Deal. In this process, we were also envisioning them through some of our core values as an anchor point. So here in this zoom in, how might our aesthetic of liberation manifest in this experience?
As part of our consensus within our ensemble, we shared this with our creative partners to communicate the essence of the work, what questions it might ask, what it might feel like. A key part of operating in consent and agency is some of those creative partners would have minimal involvement in the work. We had the agency to push it forward, and they consented to our empowerment.
And then a specific devising activity we used as a deepening of foundational world building was to weave perspectives. Consent and agency encourage trust that your separate movements are ultimately in unison, holistically creating a whole greater than the sum of its parts. In terms of differing points of view for both creators and characters, this can be likened to relativism rather than universalism. Creative partner Corinna Schulenberg capitalized on the nuance of relativism by weaving together multiple perspectives of a shared and sudden catastrophe into a poem. She called these catastrophe shards, and they were generated by the ensemble through completing a Mad Lib style prompt, which you can see here. She took our responses and wove them into a short, multi-voiced poem that helped intuit the world and inform the writing to come. Her poem.
The catastrophe wasn't the fires. The catastrophe was how we called the ashes snow. Not the storms, but how we used them to sweep the names from places. Not the graves, but the shine of the roads paved over. Not the famine, but how we sold hunger for supper. Not the drought, but what we did to thirst. Little by little, then all at once, then all for one. Little by little, shadows that move too fast, pens clicking and clicking, not knowing how long you won't know. Little by little, broken nails and flat soda, kids trapped in the bouncy house, turning some stuff on, some stuff off. Little by little, then all at once, then all for one. Not the extinctions, but the smiles we sewed on corpses. Not the genocides, but all those patriotic songs. Not the air, not little by little, then.
So this poem, along with the act of filling out the prompt for the poem, deepen the foundation to understanding differing character perspectives of a shared world.
So we had this really visceral collective sense of the world we wanted to evoke, and the lead artists had decided on the structure of the project. A hotline that began with a main menu, then branched off into fractal sets of choices. We created two main trees for our collaborators to fill in, the All for One Holistic Wellness Hope Line menu and set of offerings, and the Real Deals counter programming with its own menu and subversive offerings. This clear structure enabled us to say to our collaborators, follow your hearts. This was the first way we gave our collaborators the agency to surprise us.
So we set up a process that centered our collaborators' agency by asking, what are each person's strengths? What invitations will entice that person to contribute in a way that's instinctual and fluent to them? We encouraged all of our writers to write towards their impulses and passions. We let them follow their hearts. This meant that the structure was much more fluid than, say, like head writer and writing team.
Some writing roles that emerged during our creation process were the poet. This was Corinna, as you saw before, the person who gathers impulses from the group, then writes something surprising and original that reveals the truth of the world and sets a foundation for myth-making. The gardener. This was Jason Sang, the person who creates the first language, who plants the seeds for the rest of the piece. The witch. That's me. The person who has an impulse about the necessary spells that will conjure the unwritten sections. The one who creates recipes or sets of instructions for other writers that include a structure and a list of ingredients. The medium. This was Sienna Gonzalez, also Corinna, Rachel Hip Flores, Corinna's daughter, Mercena, someone who grabs one specific character and channels it, who takes one aspect of the project far. The navigator. This was Will, the person who shapes the emerging narrative based on the anticipated interaction, path-making, and functionality through code. And the iconoclast. This was Corey, the person who pops in and subverts expectation, the person who tries to break the world and in so doing makes it richer.
And to be clear, these are not specific roles that we predetermined, but these are ways that we can better describe the emergent modes of engagement in hindsight. This is the way our ensemble coalesced around this project.
So, the next tool we used, channeling this world to a moment. Here's a specific writing prompt from very early in the process that was generated by a lead artist and offered to the writing team. This prompt translates the world building into a next step someone can take a run with. As you can see, it's the prompt for the welcome message at the very beginning of the experience where the authority entity introduces the experience to callers. The prompt is shaped to help the writer ask, how does this experience begin?
It's pretty open-ended at this point. There's a very simple structure requirement, a welcome message on a phone, and a set of questions to consider and play with in the writing. Working in this way moved us from the collective world building into a phase where each individual writer could begin to write. And then here's an excerpt from the finished audio.
Welcome to the Holistic Wellness Hope Line, a service of the All for One Foundation, working towards a more harmonious, healthy, and secure world. In response to these unprecedented times of social isolation, economic anxiety, and social unrest, this service was created to help you actualize your best self and contribute to a better world. The guided experiences available to you through this menu will help you get clear.
So, the next tool, offer recipes. As we continued in the writing process, we held Zoom devising sessions where we played with some of these prompts together, but we also started to seed the script Google Doc with these recipes for specific modules, and we often had writers popping in and out of the doc every day to work on the prompt. As we got deeper into the phone tree, these prompts had more and more specific ingredients while also creating opportunity for freedom within that prescription.
So these recipes ensured that the lead artists were tracking the cohesiveness of the script while trusting that any writers could write any of the modules. In this way, the full script was written by 8 authors over 8 months through prompts for menus for all-for-one and real deal experiences, and expanding into an all-for-one employee backend, hidden messages, puzzles left by secret characters.
By offering writing prompts with an overall structure, we ensured that there was a spine to the project, with core elements that needed to be present, but lots of room for surprise and discovery. We also loved it when a writer would go off script from these recipes, delivering a monologue or an experience that we then had to find a place for on the phone line. And here's an example of the module created from this prompt.
You were likely drawn to this space because there is something weighing on your heart. Feelings of shame or regret. Is this past action a matter of the heart? Is it a matter of the mind? Is it a matter of the body? Of the soul?
And finally, we celebrated and affirmed delighting in impulse. Take chances, have fun with it. Not only does this tie in with our other core value of joy, but it is a way of practicing consent and agency with yourself, finding trust in your playful instincts.
One such example from our options have changed is a vending machine. Foundational world building, we wanted to touch base with the rest of the ensemble, emphasize the low barrier to entry, and modeling consent and agency, affirm that people could follow their hearts and write whatever compelled them in this world.
I mean, we felt sure that we could synthesize whatever material was generated. And I joked offhand, like, even if you wanted to make a vending machine, we find a place for it. Actually, I'm going to do that. Like, I was just said it on a whim, but it instantly grabbed my attention. It sparked curiosity and joy.
So the vending machine, or Vendy, as it came to be known, was added to the intra-organizational all-for-one section with all these quirky alliterative wares. But it came not from narrative function, but narrative fun.
Welcome to the online all-for-one vending machine for all of your immediate sustenance needs in the workplace. Option 1. Licorice ladyfingers. Option 2.
So months later, as we neared public release, we realized, of course, people should receive things from a vending machine, which is obvious in hindsight, we know. And so we mentioned this at the Discord server, and immediately a few other creative partners just popped in with things they wanted to create as treats.
Corinna wrote poems about several items, like this one for Almond Adventure.
Jason drew fun illustrations for items like the paradoxical Fireball Frosty.
Will created some puzzle hunt style puzzles for others, like the Onion Oddballs.
And Corey created surreal videos for a couple of selections, like this one for Licorice Ladyfingers. This is a 10-second clip of a 3-minute long video. The consent to this world and structure provides the agency to create nearly anything we wanted, making space for unplanned moments of, oh, wouldn't this be fun? And together, these make up our core practices that embodied consent and agency through our devising process.
Build foundational worlds to consent to a shared setting for narrative and experience.
Weave perspectives to craft a coalesced truth while affirming independent voices.
Follow your hearts. Have agency in what you want to contribute and how you want to contribute beyond strictly defined roles.
Channel the world to demonstrate active, continuous consent in the reality created.
Offer recipes to empower others with the agency to contribute.
And delight in impulse. Consent to your own joy of creation and allow yourself the agency to do what grabs your attention.
And as we were generating all this material, the core question for the lead artists became, what does synthesis look like? Or sound like in this case? How does this all pull together? And a critical question for anyone to consider when working in this way, when is it done? That's a bit trickier, and we'll come back to that.
So that's the main practice-oriented part of the session, but we also wanted to spend a few minutes on implementation for those who haven't done something in this format and are curious.
We'll share briefly on roles, internal structure, and the technology used.
I mean, when we said earlier we didn't really adhere to strictly defined roles, we meant it. At one point, we tried to map out traditional titles like directing, writing, and we ended up with this cursed graphic right here.
So aside from some of the voice actors who were hired once the script was written, almost everyone is in multiple ovals because we had permission to create and explore in whatever capacity moved us. Again, following our hearts. This liberation is an outcome of the process of consent and agency. The final script looked much more conventional in contrast, though it did start off with people just inserting and appending content as it was created.
The main new functionality required was being able to clearly indicate specific moments, both for structuring recording sessions and for tracking interactions. We ended up calling these dorps. Not only is the term completely unambiguous, like we say, like, hey, so in this dorp, we all know what we're talking about here. We like that dorp means a little village, like each of these was a little population in our world. Each dorp is intended as a discrete sound file. Each received a little 3-character ID.
We used Miro to visually map the dorps in the phone tree, tracking the various branches of the experience. Each of these rectangles refer to a specific dorp in the script. Through the expansiveness of the project, we strove to build a substantial enough system that it's unlikely two user journeys would be identical.
I mean, this visual map was useful to articulate the command structures necessary in the programming, and it helped ensure that we were all on the same page about intended functionality of interactions in the script.
The interactions were implemented in Twilio, a service for building automated calling and texting systems. This is a composite screenshot of the entire experience, though technically only that part up there is the all-for-one hope line. The rest are experiences beyond the hope line waiting to be discovered in a call.
If you haven't used Twilio, it uses node graph architecture. Our lead programmer, Phoenix, built the structure to initiate received call, as well as some template nodes that then a couple of us could opt into implementing the system alongside them, or agency.
Almost the entire system is made using these node pairs. The top node plays a dorp sound file while waiting for input. In our case, we only used key presses, not voice triggers. The lower node then splits along different paths depending on the input received.
And Twilio also lets you do some scripting to track and manipulate variables. So here's a section where we had like an incrementer variable to trigger a different behavior. If something happened enough times, we could also pass an input back and forth with the database, store audio, send text.
And then it was just the process of implementing each dorp and testing to make sure everything worked as planned.
So what grew from this? I mean, ultimately, the work coalesced into several distinct branches. As we mentioned, we have All for One's holistic wellness hope line at the core with exercises and collective care.
And that's balanced by Real Deal's subversive holistic warfare hotline and its liberatory exercises that covertly piggyback on the All for One system.
There's an inter-organizational back-end section with voicemails between some employees of All for One, and this is where Vindy also lives.
And there are several character monologues hidden throughout, revealing insight about the world beyond the phone line.
There's a character that calls herself the neighbor who leaves a trail of puzzles as breadcrumbs, both to elicit help and test the ability of those willing.
And then there are the narrative threads lurking both beyond and between these things. A broken family, split allegiances, and a mysterious entity called Unum.
And because we had grown all of these different creator instincts about what could sprout in this foundational world, we describe this as a pando narrative. Pando is the name of the multi-stem quaking aspen out in Utah that looks like a forest of individual trees, but is actually a single living organism with an interconnected root system. Similarly, our options have changed as these fairly independent activities and elements, these trees in the forest, but they're intrinsically linked together and genetically united.
This is a direct result of our devising process centering consent and agency, where the collective buy-in and consent and unified world building provided the agency to grow all these individual trees in harmony. So what did we reap? What did we gain? We believe that Flux's values show through in the experience differently than in our more traditional productions. Theatrical works are already tacitly built on consent, the audience's willing suspension of disbelief. But the interactive elements of our options of change provided agency to callers in addition to that narrative consent.
And the world continues to surprise and inspire us. Because of how we focused on setting and experience prior to anything plot or character related, we have a fertile ground we can continue to cultivate. We've had a workshop of an in-person interactive event built around the onboarding of future All for One employees. We had play testings of an epistolary game between two citizens attempting to coordinate sabotage over fragile communication systems. Corey has had his acting students at the University of Texas, Austin create and film character performances that are born from and in response to our options have changed. So remember when we asked earlier, when is it done? When do we stop? Well, turns out the question is just, when do we feel done for now?
And why are we encouraging experimentation with a process this admittedly freewheeling and unconstrained? We found it could hold so many artists, perspectives, and ideas in the creation of a rich and sprawling world for audiences to discover. It made space for each collaborator's unique strengths. supporting both a demonstration of excellence and an opportunity for growth. And it allowed us to surprise each other with these disparate elements woven together into an overall structure.
So we want to encourage people to experiment creating this way, with radical trust in a process of consent and agency, seeding a narrative garden and seeing what blooms. By extension, we want to encourage building an ensemble of collaborators with whom this would be feasible, a cohort where you can feel liberated in your art-making, creativity, and play.
With that, here's our contact information. The QR code goes to Flux's landing page for Our Options Have Changed, which has all the information about the production. There's no financial transaction required to sign up that way. But we also figured we'd also provide the number directly to you who are watching. And we're really curious about what the session sparks for you and whether you could see this kind of structure working with your own processes and collaborators. And now we can
I think we have time for one question from the late start, but we're happy to answer if anyone has a question. And we're happy to chat afterwards too, yeah.
I'd love to hear about the audience.
Did you see any patterns? What they wanted, what delighted them, and how they used it?
Yeah, I'd say it was like as varied as the impulses to create it. We had some people who like would dip in and felt totally, charmed by the all for one wellness exercises, and they made them feel so good. And so they do the embodied resilience dance party and call back. And then there were other folks who instantly kind of got the ick of the kind of subversive corporate thing happening and like went searching for those answers.
And it is a little weirder than traditional theater because we're used to like seeing an audience and immediately getting the vibe, and here we're like, hold on, like we don't actually know. So a lot of it is self-reported. Yeah.
If
what's there, we could see a little bit like what we had some simple tracking as for like when nodes were activated that we could look through in the back if we needed to see some frequency and make sure like, are people getting all the way through with some things? So a lot of that comes from self-report, but like hearing someone's like, okay, I just finished a 2-hour call with this. And like, I have so many theories about things happening. So some people went real deep and some people like, I did an exercise, it was really fun. And we're like, hey, but if that's your journey, you just want to call and do a thing, that's totally fine too.
Yeah.
I think that is our time. We're happy to chat with anyone else would like to. We'll pop these slides for this in the Discord as well. And thank you all very much.
Thanks, everybody.